Everybody joining me on today's show is CBS Sports NFL writer Jordan Dajani. And Jordan, I appreciate you taking time to come on the show today.
Hey, what's going on, man? Thank you so much for having me on.
Oh, yeah, glad to have you on. I think it's been a year since I've had you on. Sorry for the long distance, but yeah, man, I'm glad to talk some NFL. Just kind of not the week we've been used to having in the NFL with so many one-score games.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Maybe a little boring to the casual viewer, but there are still things we can take away from this week. I guess we can probably start off with the Kansas City Chiefs' epic collapse against the Tennessee Titans. Just 3 points scored while the Titans roll with a very depleted secondary. And then, of course, the Cincinnati Bengals all of a sudden have the number one seed in the AFC with their 41-17 blowout over the Ravens. That was pretty incredible. Definitely some things to jump into there. And then we could probably talk about some quarterback statuses as well. Look at Sam Darnold with the Panthers. Things aren't going well there. Zach Wilson's hurt now. Justin Fields doesn't look too good, although I would attribute that to maybe some problems on the offensive line and play calling, but still he hasn't done enough to clinch the starting position. So, yeah, maybe not the most entertaining week in the NFL, but at the same time, there are some things to discuss.
I mean, we all knew going into the week that Miami and Atlanta was going to be the best game of the week.
Yeah, that's the one I actually haven't sat down and watched the film on yet. I'll probably do that later tonight. But of course, there's a bunch of stuff to talk about, with Tua's future and everything that way.
Yeah, I think I looked at it on average through the first 6 weeks. We were getting 7 one-score games. So we got 2, which I'm not even going to count that Monday night miss as a good game. I joked on Twitter. I said the only thing that saved that game for me is that was the first time I watched the Manning cast. I said if it wasn't for that, I may have checked out of that one. That was not NFL football at its finest. I'll just say that.
Yeah, that was your first time watching the Manning cast, really?
I've watched the traditional broadcast every other time. But last night I said I'm not really overly excited about this game. I'll be honest with you, just because it looked kind of the way it looked. So I said, let me flip it over and see what's going on here. And I saw what I got already when Tom Brady was on. So I missed the Marshawn Lynch part. I missed that part, but I watched with Brady, and of course I saw it with Drew Brees on there, which I know that both Peyton and Eli were trying to get Drew Brees to give up some secrets going on in New Orleans, which he wasn't biting on that one, but it was pretty good all around with them guys.
Yeah, I did kind of the opposite. I noticed sometimes in some of the Manning broadcasts, I miss a lot of things going on with the game because you're so enticed by the conversation they're having and the guests. So I watched the whole first half on the Manning cast. Glad I did that for the Marshawn Lynch part, of course. And then I flipped over to the traditional just for the second half to, really sink my teeth in terms of what was happening on the football field itself.
So, on Sunday, I was really excited for 12 o'clock. I made sure I was sitting in the couch ready for the Titans and the Chiefs. How surprised were you the way the Titans were just able? I mean, you don't use this word a lot in the NFL. Pretty much dominate the game and dominate the Chiefs.
Yeah, it was very surprising for a lot of different reasons. And I think we can start off with the crazy stats themselves. I mean, this is the largest loss of Patrick Mahomes' career, regular or postseason, 24-point differential there. It snapped a streak of 31 straight games where he had a touchdown pass, which was the 9th longest in NFL history. And he also threw his 9th interception of the year. That's tied for the most in the NFL. His 6th straight game with an interception. That's the longest streak of his career. The Chiefs have now lost 4 games this season. Mahomes has never lost more than 4 games in a season as a starter. So things are not going very well in Kansas City. And it was surprising, especially because I brought up the Chiefs or the Titans depleted secondary. That was a major issue going into this game. And facing, one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL, we thought he would take advantage of that. Turns out they couldn't even score a touchdown. So that was very surprising. But you probably mentioned, but I was actually in the press box covering that game for CBS. And when I was watching Mahomes in the pocket, he looked like he was spazzing out a bit. He wasn't comfortable. Granted, he was facing a lot of pressure from that Titans front 7 all game long, but he didn't look like the same quarterback we have, we've grown to love, right? He was missing some throws. He was noticeably inaccurate. It was not the Patrick Mahomes we're used to. So if you weren't nervous about the Chiefs and their status as legitimate contenders coming into this year just yet, you should be now.
Yeah, going to that game, I kind of felt like, okay, yeah, defensively they're not good this year. I mean, they've been not great the 2 years they made it to the Super Bowl, but the defense I think feel like has taken a real step back. But watching him play, does it feel like to you watching him that sometimes he's forcing the issue? I know, when he came out of college at Texas Tech, he played with a bad defense. I mean, Texas Tech, when we've ever known him to have a good defense, in college football. But he forced the issue a lot at Texas Tech. Then he gets to Kansas City. They fixed that. It kind of seems like maybe not completely to agree. Maybe he has reverted back to a little bit of the Texas Tech Mahomes, thinking in his mindset, look, my defense is bad. Sometimes I'm just going to have to force stuff to give us a shot to win.
Yeah, it's a fine line between being a playmaker and then also forcing the issue, right? One throw could go for a touchdown and we say that's an MVP candidate, and the other gets picked off and we say, what's he doing? And that's kind of the fine line that Patrick Mahomes has walked through the early stages of his career. And to his credit, more often than not, he's looked like the, legitimate star signal caller making those kind of plays. That's not happening anymore. And on some of the plays, especially some of the ones I saw against Washington the week prior, he was throwing passes he shouldn't have. He was wrapped up by two defenders throwing the ball up in the air that was getting picked off. He is forcing the issue. And I think a lot of people are hypothesizing the reason being that his defense is so bad that he has to score because he doesn't want to punt the ball back to let the other offense on the field and face this atrocious secondary. So that's why that's what I'm kind of reasoning myself and thinking that Patrick Mahomes may be kind of forcing the issue here just a little bit. It does seem at several points during the game, throughout multiple games this season, where it just seems like he needs to settle down just a little bit. They've abandoned the run several times this year. Granted, they've dealt with injuries on that side as well, but it seems like he really needs to settle down. The offense as a whole really needs to settle down. So yes, to your point, it does feel like he's forcing the issue several times this year.
Yeah, and you bring up the running game. Of course, Clyde Edwards-Hilaire's, he's injured, and Pat Mahomes was the Patrick Mahomes. I don't want, his mother to get on to me if she happened to watch this. Patrick Mahomes, he was the leading rusher on Sunday, which I know part of that too is they got behind quickly. But that offensive line, of course, after the Super Bowl and then rebuilt that offensive line this year, it seems like they are not as, like you said, they don't run the ball as much, but also they're not as effective with it. I mean, they were never one of the better rushing teams in the league when it comes to quantity, but they were good at, average yards enough to get defense off. I mean, I wonder if that's also hampering the offense a little bit just because the running game is absolutely not there.
Yeah, I would agree with that point. And I'm certainly not campaigning for the Chiefs to become a run-first offense. I know that's not going to happen, but you're right about your point about the offensive line. I mean, I don't want to say that they're terrible or anything. It definitely was retooled. They got a lot of young guys there as well. I'd probably describe them as inconsistent up to this point, especially when it comes to pass protection. Just watching the game against Tennessee this Sunday, it really seemed like some of their star players got the best of the tackles, like Harold Landry and Bud Dupree had some really big plays that they stepped up at big times, and they haven't been able to on that defense for the time being through the early stages of the season. So the offensive line has definitely been a little bit inconsistent, and I would agree that they're probably not the best group when it comes to dominating the line of scrimmage to establish said run. But I think you can pick and choose your spots and where you think the Chiefs probably should have ran the ball in any given situation.
Let's talk about the Titans. I mean, they are the team that won the game, and they won 27-3, dominated. I mean, up front, really on both sides of the ball. Defensive line really looks like for the Titans the last couple of weeks has really picked up. And then look, they've had a good 2 weeks. I mean, you beat the Bills and you beat the Chiefs. I mean, there's a lot of momentum there with the Titans right now.
It's pretty crazy. I mean, not even 7 days, and you defeat the two teams everyone had at the top of the AFC coming into this regular season. Pretty incredible. And I was actually at both those games. The atmosphere was awesome. It was cool partying with Bills Mafia and all those guys. They really came out and showed out. But I mean, it's you have great takeaways to take away from both sides of the ball for Tennessee. I mean, we saw on Sunday that this offense has the potential to be one of the best in the NFL. Of course, you have an MVP candidate in Derrick Henry, who you jump on his back every given Sunday, but also the passing attack. I mean, A.J. Brown is one of the best receivers in the NFL. He had 100 yards by halftime on Sunday. Ryan Tannehill's always been a consistent presence under center, not afraid to throw that deep ball. And then you have Julio Jones in the waiting. We'll see whenever he gets 100% healthy. But this offense has the potential to be one of the better units in the NFL. Now, as for the defense, again, I can't overstate how shocked I was and how well that secondary played. You mentioned the front seven, that defensive line. Danico Autry has been one of the steals of free agency in my mind that people around the league probably aren't talking about. He's been a presence on that defensive line for the Titans. The linebacking core is coming together. I thought David Long played one of his best games as well. And, they have a very undermanned secondary. One of the guys who played a considerable amount of starts, Maven, was signed off of a practice squad the week of the game, and he played fairly well too. So it speaks to the resilience of this Titans team. And I think talking to the players after the game, that's what they always harped on as well is, we'll bend a little bit, but we're damn sure not going to break. And that's what kind of Kevin Byard told us. And we saw that against the Bills. The Bills went 2 of 5 in the red zone in that matchup. And that's the reason they lost that game. It's because the Titans secondary performed when they had their backs up against the wall. So I think we learned from over the past week, those 2 games, that this Titans defense should not be looked at as one of the worst in the league. They can step up when it matters. And that's important when it comes to trying to examine and dissect what a contender in the NFL is made of.
Yeah, I feel like in football, college and professional now, it's not like it used to be where you just needed that defense holding teams down, yardage and everything. I think the most important stat is how many points you give up, or red zone, third down, that kind of stuff. That's where football's at, where you really can judge a defense. And if you're holding teams out of the end zone, and when you've got an offense like Titans, because look, Derrick Henry only had 86 yards. I mean, for some running backs, that's a good day. For Derrick Henry, that's a bad day at the office, really, when you look at it. I mean, I think his longest run was 11 yards. But Tannehill, 270 yards, 1 touchdown to 1 passing. You talk about A.J. Brown and what they have with Julio when he gets healthy, and then they have a chance, and they have the potential. They can go up tempo with you and really press a defense hard, and they did that against the Chiefs on Sunday. So they can beat you so many different ways. It's not Derrick Henry, it's not the passing game. It's really just kind of pick your poison against this team if you're on the other side on defense.
That's what we thought it was going to be coming into this year. And obviously, due to injury and inconsistencies, it hasn't been that way just yet. But one of the reporters in the post-game press conference used that phrase you just did, an offense where you have to pick your poison. So hopefully for Titans fans, we're seeing that kind of emerge and evolve as the season has gone on now. A.J. Brown's finally past his food poisoning and all that crazy stuff, and Julio Jones returned to the starting lineup. Derrick Henry's obviously on an absolute heater. So maybe you're right. And I think that we could probably look at Sunday's game as the moment where that kind of changed, where the Titans are hitting on all cylinders, not only on offense, but on both sides of the ball as well.
Yeah, and playing the Colts on Sunday, which I know the Colts are like 2 games behind them. You get a win there, you can really set yourself up, really creating some distance in the AFC South too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the Titans definitely should be the favorite if you're a gambling man when it comes to clinching that division. But I'm definitely not overlooking that Colts team right now. I mean, it's a storyline that I feel like the national media is not talking enough about, is the emergence of Carson Wentz. After the struggles and adversity he's had to overcome through not only the early portions of the regular season, but also preseason with ankles injuries and everything like that. He's been able to come together and become the leader that this Colts offense really needed. And sure enough, even in harsh conditions, he was able to get that big win against the 49ers. This Colts team is really coming into their own, and their defense is nothing to sneeze at as well. So, the Titans are probably going to be someone who is identified by many gamblers as someone you could hammer this Sunday on your sport betting app, whatever it is. But I'm just saying, don't overlook this Colts team, especially with them at home. This is a team that really can score an upset victory over Tennessee.
Now, it feels like to me for a lot of people that the Cincinnati Bengals just came out of nowhere, and then on Sunday they beat the Ravens, 41-17. I mean, the Ravens had a 17-13 lead in the second half at one point. It's just amazing when you look at that score just to think that. And then this is also a Ravens team that blew out the Chargers the week before. How surprising for you was that scene of what the Bengals did? I mean, Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase, just that connection from LSU, it seems they've got that rapport. They're connecting really, really quickly here for 2 guys. Look, Burrow's in his second year, but he didn't play many games last year due to the injury. So he's still an inexperienced NFL-wise. And then Jamar Chase being a rookie, just what they're able to do with those 2 young guys and T. Higgins and Joe Mixon. I mean, this team's got a lot of weapons.
Yeah, so I actually just watched that film an hour ago, and, the final score may have been just a little bit misleading. The Bengals kind of ran away with it. There was a point in either the third or early fourth quarter where the Ravens went for it on 4th down because they were down, I think, 14 points, and they didn't get it, and that's the moment where the Bengals ran away with everything. But yeah, you can't overstate how good this Bengals team has been. And at some point, they kind of have come out of nowhere, right? Like, it wasn't long ago when they had to barely beat Urban Meyer and the Jacksonville Jaguars at home on primetime. But, you bring up Joe Burrow. He really has evolved as a legitimate signal caller in this league. And I think we saw those steps being taken even more on Sunday. I'd be very happy if he was my starting quarterback, no doubt about it. And Jamar Chase, I mean, he's on pace for 1,831 receiving yards this season. That would be fifth most for any player in a campaign in NFL history. That's pretty absurd. And they obviously have a chemistry that was established during their college days. I think NFL teams and front offices are looking at that, and they realize that, and they might think that's important when it comes to drafting to make their quarterback feel more comfortable. But the thing that really stands out to me about the Bengals is that they have now recorded their two largest wins in franchise history over two specific division opponents in the Steelers and the Ravens this year in terms of point differential. So the Bengals win over the Ravens. That was the biggest win they've ever had over Baltimore in franchise history. That should tell you that this franchise is turning over a new leaf, because the Ravens are not a team to sneeze at either. They're going to be a legitimate contender as well. But, they struggled in pass coverage. There were some inconsistencies with Lamar Jackson. I think he's really turned into more of a legitimate passer this year, but Sunday wasn't his best outing. He was a bit inaccurate. So this Ravens team is good, and they're going to be in the mix for it when it's all said and done. But at the same time, we definitely need to give the Bengals their due for what they've done through the early stages of this year.
So when you look at the AFC, you've got the Bengals at the top at 5-2. You've got the Titans 5-2. Ravens are 5-2. Of course, you got the Bills and the Chargers. A lot of good teams in this conference. If you had to peg a team right now, who would be your favorite?
I still am leaning towards the Buffalo Bills. If I had to power rank all the teams, I mean, I can't do it off the top of my head, but they'd probably be number 1, number 2, number 3, somewhere around there. Yeah, they suffered a bad loss to Tennessee, but Josh Allen is not regressing. A lot of people thought that might happen. That's not happening at all. He's got good wide receivers, a good, consistent offensive line. The run game, while not elite, is better than it was in years past with Devin Singletary and the emergence of Zach Moss as well. And, I wanted to say this on the podcast too. I don't think there's any really good defenses in the NFL. You can't really trust one of these teams to just shut down an offense no matter who it is. There's no such thing as an elite defense, it seems like, anymore. But the Bills do have, and the stats back it up, one of the best defenses in the NFL in my mind. So, yeah, they had a bad loss, but they had a bye week to recuperate. I still like the Bills a lot when it comes to identifying an AFC team with legitimate Lombardi chances.
Real quick on Thursday night, of course, we have the big matchup, which is kind of taking a hit due to some players being on the COVID list with the Packers. But, Arizona and Green Bay are playing on Thursday Night Football. Of course, Devontae Adams is, out. Then Alan Lazard, the Packers are going to be decimated. Look at receiver position. Just what's your feel in this game? And even with all that, how important is this on prime time, the only game for the Arizona Cardinals? Because it feels like with Arizona, I think the people who follow the league know how good they are, but maybe your casual fan still isn't showing them, maybe, I wouldn't say not respect, but appreciate what they've done so far this year at 7-0, being the only undefeated team left in the league.
Yeah, this game was incredibly important before COVID, ravaged the Packers. And I mean, let's be honest, like we're going to be less interested in this matchup because there's no Devontae Adams, there's no Alan Lazard, there's no defensive coordinator. I mean, that's obviously got to hurt. I mean, maybe the Packers could cover the spread or something like that, but the Cardinals are probably going to be the team that everyone picks to win on Thursday night. Seems like we're just gifting them the best regular season record in the NFL this year, right? I mean, I identified that spot against the Browns as maybe a point where they could lose. But, the Browns obviously have a really banged-up Baker Mayfield and a lot of guys on the injury report. Give credit to the Cardinals, too. They didn't even have their head coach on the sideline and a bunch of guys on the injury report as well. So that's important that team has been able to overcome some level of adversity. But I still want to see more. I don't know if I'm going to put money on the Cardinals to win the Super Bowl just yet. I mean, yes, I wouldn't be shocked if they finish with the best record in the league, right? That wouldn't shock me, the start that they've gotten off to and the emergence and evolution of the offense that we've seen with Kyler Murray and Cliff Kingsbury. But when you look around the NFC, you're probably going to take the Tampa Bay Buccaneers over them. You're probably going to take Aaron Rodgers and the Packers when they're healthy, COVID-free, over them. They've been to 2 straight NFC championship games. They have that postseason experience, something that the Cardinals do not have at all. And maybe, a team that I really like, even though they got punched in the mouth by the Cardinals a couple weeks ago, is the Los Angeles Rams with Matthew Stafford. We know that defense can be one of the best in the league. We know the offense now has a consistent presence under center and a veteran with Matthew Stafford. That's a team that I think is primed to make a very deep run as well. So, yeah, the Cardinals, they've improved every year with Cliff Kingsbury and Kyler Murray, and that's the same this season. They're going to get to the playoffs, but, they don't have that experience when it comes to those games, that matter the most. And, they could win one or two, but I still don't believe in them as a legitimate contender. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm biased, but that's just kind of how I view the landscape of the NFC at this point in time.
I guess the good news for the Packers is Aaron Rodgers is not on that list for Thursday night. So whenever you have one of them guys, you do have an opportunity. You do have an opportunity. So it's going to be interesting. Still going to check it out on Thursday night. It's going to be an interesting game. And Jordan, I do appreciate you taking the time coming on the podcast, talking the NFL, especially jumping into the Titans and the Chiefs. They're very interesting. Big game there. Still surprised by it. But anyways, like I said, I appreciate the time. If the listeners and viewers wanted to follow you online, where can they find you and all the great work you're doing over there at CBS Sports?
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at Jordan Dajani. That's Dajani. Always putting stuff up on CBSSports.com, the best place for your NFL news, in my opinion, which is not biased at all. I publish 2 gambling columns per week, a picks column and a look at headlines column. So if you're into the gambling perspective of sports, I would consider myself a good follow. So definitely go check out my work over at CBSSports.com.
All right. Sounds good, Jordan. Once again, appreciate the time, and I look forward to talking again sometime down the road.